Facebook famously determined that if a new member invited 10 friends within 14 days, they were hooked for life. So they focused religiously on driving the user experience to this key metric. If you apply this product-based approach to B2B sales, then you can identify those users that are ready to talk. And this method is known as the Product Qualified Lead, or PQL. So if you sell in a freemium, open source, or trial model, then the PQL method is critical to give your sales team visibility into who is ready to talk. So talk to your data team, or better yet, partner with Whaler's team of data scientists to develop a PQL model tailored specifically for your business. You'll be empowered by knowing exactly when a user is ready to convert. To see specific examples, go to getwhaler.com/Andy. That's GETWHALR.com/Andy. And as a bonus, if you sign up to learn more about Whaler and PQLs, then Whaler will send you their optimized 2-page master services contract that you can leverage for your own business free of charge. It's time to accelerate. Hi, this is Andy. Welcome to another edition of Frontline Friday with my regular and very special guest, Bridget Gleason. Now, before we get to the show, Bridget and I have a favor to ask of you. We'd really appreciate it if you took time right now to leave a review for this show on iTunes. And while you're there, click the button, subscribe to Accelerate. Make sure you get Frontline Friday automatically each week. Also, we need to hear from you. More specifically, we need your sales questions. What can we answer for you? What challenges do you have that we can help you with? So go to accelerate.fm/frontline and enter your question there. Each month, we're going to select one listener's question to be the question of the month. And the winner will receive a $50 Amazon gift card. So remember, go to accelerate.fm/frontline to give us your question and maybe win $50. So Bridget, how are you today?
I'm fantastic, as per my name. That's how I got it. Yes, as I was saying, it's when we are recording this, we're at the very end of our quarter, so it's mad dash. We're having a good quarter, though, so that's great.
Always good. Better than having a bad quarter.
Always, yep.
Close those orders.
That's right, but all good.
Yeah.
No complaints.
No. Well, that's because you're fantastic.
Mm-hmm.
That's it.
And you?
I'm fine. I'm good. Yeah. I mean, a little different. I don't have a big team of salespeople running around, just myself. But yeah, I did close an order today, and with a sponsor for this show. So all very exciting.
That's great.
Yeah.
Good.
Yeah. So, just getting ready as we record this. We're actually a couple weeks ahead of time, or a few weeks ahead of time. Actually, we're sort of the big holiday weekend coming up here. So, sort of a nice laid back time here in New York City.
Yeah,
locals
isn't that nice?
Get out of town and leaves the restaurants and the movie theaters open for the rest of us who stick around to sort of get in without any problem.
That's great.
Yeah. So we had sort of a topic picked out we're going to talk about, but I was going to preface it a little bit by, I had a great interview on this show. I'm not sure I have to look at my schedule, see if it aired by the time that this episode is aired, with the author, Jeffrey Colvin, who had written a book, Talent is Overrated, which was a fantastic book, bestseller, New York Times bestseller, business bestseller. And he's a regular contributor to Fortune.com, Fortune magazine. And that book was an excellent book. And had him back on the show. We're talking about his newest book, which's been out for a year or so, called Humans Are Underrated. The subtitle is What High Achievers Know That Brilliant Machines Never Will. And the whole story of the book is with the sort of increasing pace of technological advancement and AI and machine learning, things we've spoken about on the show, I speak about with other guests on the show. It's like, what's the role of people going to be, especially in sales? And he does a pretty deep dive into the economics of employment and how employment over the ages over the last, let's say, 200 years since the start of the Industrial Revolution, or maybe a little bit before that, have been impacted. Employment's been impacted by advances in technology. And, you're talking about the Industrial Revolution was really a boon for low-skilled workers because it basically displaced the artisans, right? Mass manufacturing of clothing and weaponry, let's say, used to be done in a workshop basis, but suddenly factories, and so it was great for unskilled workers. And then when electrification became widespread and we started to have the rise of the modern factory, that became good for skilled workers because needed skilled people to operate the complex machines and to build the things that are being manufactured. We needed a new management class that didn't exist before, so high skilled workers were in demand in a way they hadn't been before. And then coming into sort of the technological revolution in the 70s and 80s, suddenly that was great for sort of the middle tier workers, administrative workers and so on, where technology enabled them to become much more productive than they were before. But he said now we're sort of coming into this phase, sort of the fourth phase, where technology is becoming so good that it's not only continuing to impact or becoming so powerful, but impact the middle, but it's also beginning to have demonstrable impact on low skill jobs as well as the high skill jobs. And it gives some really great examples about the fact that the single largest profession in the United States is truck drivers, which I didn't know.
Really?
Yeah. And long haul as well as short haul and so on. But obviously with the rise of autonomous vehicles, a profession that people have thought and he cites examples in his book of experts, repeated number of experts over not that long ago, within the last 10, 15 years saying, oh yeah, never be able to replace a driver, right? Behind the wheel. And really, the course of the last 3 to 4 years, we've seen that. So of course that's going to happen. And on, the high end, it gives examples of like law firms where it used to be, if you were a beginning associate at a law firm, you spent all your time, going through discovery documents and lawsuits and so on. You're a plaintiff in a case, the defendant may have put 500,000 pages of discovery documents on your desk that you have to go through. And now there are applications and systems that, where machines are doing that reading of 500,000 pages of documents, and they'll do it in a couple of weeks as opposed to 6 months to having a team of 10 junior attorneys do. And they do it better, and they don't get tired, and they can spot patterns that the humans can't, and so on. So we're seeing.
Yeah, because that sounds like a miserable job for me. So I think that's a good one that we can have.
For you, but for those aspiring lawyers,
I know.
You don't need as many lawyers. And
that's
so
right.
We're seeing this unprecedented disruption on the highest skilled jobs as well, being driven by. And so the premise and the thesis that Jeff Colvin puts forward is that the skills that become more valuable in this environment as technology encroaches more and more is the ability to become more human, the ability to have a meaningful interaction, to build a relationship, to collaborate, to co-create, that these are things that surveys and businesses and hiring patterns showing are becoming the skills over the next 10 to 20 years that are being the highest demand. And so we think about that, that's fundamentally, that should be something that, falls right into the province of sales, right? We've had all these horror stories and, gloom and doom stories and studies put out about, B2B salespeople losing, going out of existence, and some significant fraction of them by 2020, I think is what Forrester said, 25% or 20%, but perhaps maybe not the case. So it's very interesting. And I sort of brought that up because, oftentimes I'm a member of these various discussion groups online where sales professionals, contribute questions and discussion threads and so on. And in light of having read Colvin's book and spoken to him on the show and had a great conversation with him, it sort of struck me that, I look at and monitor these threads, and no one ever asks a question. And this sort of, these are all, management level, sales management level people, is no one ever asks a question about customers. All the questions posed on some of these discussion forums are all about process and technology and so on. And I just find it so curious that we've got this gap between what people find that compelling to talk about versus what seems to be the case is that, that stuff's going to become more and more automated and less the province of humans. And that's really that interaction between two humans is really the thing that's really going to be important.
Do you think, Andy, that those discussions are not happening, or they're not happening?
Well, they're not in those forums, right? I'm just taking a public example. In this case, it's one called Modern Sales Pros, which has some great questions people are asking about, what's that, process technology, compensation, territory division, so on. But
isn't Modern Sales Pros also really a sales ops channel?
Like somewhat, but I look at the titles of the people that are contributing, and it's VPs of sales and director of sales and so on. And I just find it sort of curious, because we've got this, there's another thing that was really interesting in another sort of gap that I found really curious in Colvin's book, as he talks about that. Oh, it's a quote from, I think somebody, a senior level person at Oracle, saying that, the skill to be most in demand is going to be empathy. And what's the exact quote? Okay, the exact quote here is, empathy is the critical 21st century skill. That was an Oracle Group Vice President, Meg Baer, said that. And yet the research is showing that this has sort of been done continuously since 1979. They survey like 14,000 college students, I think, each year. And what they found is the amount of empathy is actually declining in the studied population year over year. And so, again, it's fascinated by, and I believe what Colvin says in his book. I subscribe to that, as you probably know from our conversations. But we're coming into this environment where empathy is going to be a really more highly valued skill, and yet our population of people coming into our workforce has less of it.
I think that, to me, that sounds like good news.
Oh, yeah?
I think
Why?
Well, for me, that empathy is going to be so highly valued.
Oh, it's great for you, but as a sales VP, it's a little problematic because it's the skill that your salespeople are going to need, yet it's the one that they have, seemingly year over year have less of. Partly, it's not entirely driven by, our preoccupation with our screens, even though that's part of it, but it started declining, when you were in college.
Well, I think there are other studies that just from a very, this may be somewhat of a generalization, but
that's what we traffic in here.
I know that is what we traffic in, is that women tend to be more empathetic, empathic, and there is a lack of women in sales, especially sales leadership. So for me, I think that this could be then just one angle that I think about is, gosh, if empathy being a very important factor, being definitely very important in sales, being a skill that's important, it may start to attract more women. And I think one of the reasons, and you and I may have talked about this before on a show, that women don't choose to go into sales. It's not that they won't be good at it, but there is the language, the terminology, the kind of bro culture.
Yeah, it's all macho.
Women just, they don't want to be in it. But if the tide starts to turn and it really does require a set of skills and become more and more emphasized because of technology or whatever, that the trend is that empathy is just highly desired and translates into, let's say, success, I could see it being a draw for more women into the field. And, I love being in sales, and I would love to see more women get into it. I also understand why in many of the cultures they don't want to get into it.
Sure.
So trying to find a silver lining in all of this.
Well, I think there's great silver lining. And one is the one you just bring up right there, is that for women in particular, and not just necessarily in the sales profession, but across the board, is, there's research from a group called Oxford Economics that asked employers what are the skills that are going to be needed most in the next 5 to 10 years. And the answers that came back were none of the sort of traditional left brain skills that you associate sort of with business, business acumen, analytical skills, and so on. Instead, what they're saying the top priorities were empathy, relationship building, teamwork, co-collaboration, co-creation, collaboration, cultural sensitivity, all right brain skills, which, according to research, women tend to be more endowed with. Now, it's not all or nothing, right? It's not like, there are obviously men that do it as well, but in general, research shows that. So you'll think a self-interested and foresightful sales manager, executive, would make it a priority to say, we need to, it's not just a nice to have. We would make it a priority. I would, if I was in that case, if I were hire more women into sales.
I know, Andy, just not to digress too far here. I would hire more women in sales if I had more women who were interested. I get one woman candidate for every, not even 10, 20. I just don't see very many.
Well, and so a question for you it would be is, and we've touched on this before, it is what's in the job description, for instance, the posting that you put out there. And maybe, part of it has to be, if you put in the words,
hunter, crushing it. I don't put that in.
That's what. That sounds just like you, because you are Captain Fantastic.
I know.
Picture of you with your hands on your hips, legs spread apart, cape flowing behind
exactly.
you.
I do want the cape. Remember,
sort of the Superman pose.
I want the cape.
Yeah, but if the job posting said, key skills are empathizing, collaborating, co-creating, building relationships. I don't think I've ever seen a sales job posting. I mean, somebody could send one to me. That'd be great. But I'm not sure I've ever seen one that contains all those words. And if they start doing that, which is, that's perfectly right on the mark, wouldn't you think? If you're saying, look, I'm trying to hire somebody and these are the skills that, demonstrated skills we need to be able to see, empathy and collaboration, so on. I think you'd attract a different population pool. It wouldn't be overnight, but over time, for sure. Yeah,
that's a good point. I remember, Andy, when I worked at Yesware, which and
yes, I do.
Remember. Yes, you do. And I remember a recruiter contacting me about the role and sending me the VP of Sales job description. And I remember reading the job description thinking, oh my gosh, I have never read a job description for a VP of Sales like this. And it's the CEO is he's very empathetic, Matthew Bellows, a lot around mindfulness and meditation and the culture and the people and empathy. And I remember reading it just thinking, it almost brought tears to my eyes. I thought I didn't know that this existed. I didn't know that a CEO would want this. And so I remember I was so struck by that. And after, I went through the process, I got the job, obviously. And and they were very, Matthew was deliberate. They wanted, if they could find someone, they did want a female, because of these skills that they wanted to bring to the company. So they didn't want a female so that, we feel like we need a woman on the executive team. There's a set of skills and traits and nature and that is more inherent in women who we talk to. And so they were very deliberate about it. So I guess to your point, I definitely see that as a good starting point.
So when's the first time you had a female boss?
When was the first time I had a female boss? Probably at Engine Yard. My boss was a female.
Yeah, which was, I mean, well into your career, right? Not to put a number to it.
Oh, yeah. Thank you. Let's not. No, many, many, many years into my career. I mean, it was mostly that I was often the only woman on the team or one of a couple.
Yeah.
So, yeah, you didn't have. I remember when I was at Xerox, there were a couple of female managers, not very many. Couple of women on the team, not very many, but they had a couple. But it wasn't. It was many, many, many years in, before I had a female boss.
Yeah, I mean, and the fact is, it's still considered somewhat unusual in sales.
Yeah, I think that's right. I don't know what the statistics are today, but it's embarrassingly low.
Yeah, which is, like I said, it's just unbelievable. But when I look at it in the context of how the world is evolving, as we talked about here, is technology saying, look, really, what it's machines are going to be limited to some degree in what they do. There's we've always been wrong when we claimed, hey, machines can never be able to do this, right? But there are some things that perhaps the machines, at least not for many, many years, are really going to be able to compete with in humans. And that is that interaction, that authentic, intensely human interaction, uniquely human interaction.
Right.
That is going to stand apart. And so I think, getting back to the point for sellers listening to this show and managers, is you need to say, okay, what are those human characteristics? We sort of talked about empathy, collaboration, relationships, but we talk about the very specific things about how you differentiate yourself through how you sell. And not meaning your process, but meaning how you interact, how you engage, how you connect with another human being, which is not something you're writing down in your overall sales process, something that is sort of, you have to learn to encode in your own behavior.
It will be interesting to see. And I mean, to your point, we can say, oh, computers will never be able to do that. Technology will never be able to do that. And we don't really know.
Well, yeah. I mean, all we know is that inexorably, as Colvin points out in his book, machines are getting better. We're not. And they're not just getting, better by a factor of one. They're getting 100 times better over the course of a few years. And you keep, multiplying that throughout, if it's Moore's law coming into being, what's the computer capacity is doubling, or capability, power, doubling every, 18 months or 24 months?
Mm-hmm. And the number has changed.
But it's still basically on track.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. I mean, I think it's sped up.
Yeah. So we're not competing. We're not improving at that level. So yeah, making predictions about what machines will or will not be able to do, sort of a sucker's game.
Yeah, and I think it also, who knows what they'll do? But I think the challenge in front of us, though, is, they're doing more and more things. What opportunities does that create for us as humans?
Well, it's to be more human. I think Colvin
and
really,
to be
really
more
nailed
human.
it.
That's exactly, and I think that's the beauty of it. Change is the constant, and so learning how to adapt. And I like that it's moving this way. I don't want to be doing the robotic. I don't want to be doing those tasks. So I like that what's being required is something that is human, that does require, at least right now, computers can't do. And that's great. Yeah, I like that part of it.
Well, and I think the question to consider within sales, especially in tech business, is can there still be enough value added sort of at the entry level sales roles to not have those become automated? And I think that's still an open question because, given the way the role is executed in many, many companies, it's possible. If it's just setting appointments, setting up demos, so on, that you may have bots that can do that.
Yeah, and I think it just means I think the sales, I don't want to say the process will change. The buying process will change, which I think then will, by necessity, the sales process will change. I think maybe salespeople will their involvement will come perhaps at a different stage or in a different way than we think about it now.
Well, I think the way go ahead. I'm sorry.
Well, I was going to say, when you think about, the good old days, the early days when I would go see customers. First of all, I had to go see them because we didn't have the technology to facilitate. I know that's hard to believe, but didn't have the technology to facilitate WebEx and meetings online and that sort of thing. And they didn't have the information. I'd have to go give it to them and deliver it to them. And so, like you pointed out, people thought, oh, salespeople are going to be irrelevant as soon as they can find things that they need online and get the answers online. Well, that hasn't been the case. So I think we're just continually having to adapt to what technology provides. But ultimately, I don't know that it's changed. I think people still buy from people for the most part.
Well, they do. I mean, but the importance that they place on, I said, the empathy, the co-creation, I think is a really important part. That being an advisor, the collaborative part, hugely important. That's not going to be easily replicated through machine intelligence. People have to be very conscious about, okay, what steps am I taking today, right, to start making myself better in those dimensions? And so it really requires sort of the first step is sort of do an internal assessment or have somebody help you with that and say, yeah, where do I stand on this scale? If you're selling something and you can't make that connection with the customer, then you're not adding any value. If you're not adding any value, you might as well be talking to a machine.
+1.
All right. We've run out of time for today. Captain Fantastic, great to talk with you as always.
And likewise, have a great Friday and long weekend.
Yeah. We've got the holiday weekend coming up. Of course, it'll be a thing of distant memory when this episode comes out, but yeah, looking forward to it.
Likewise.
All right, everybody, thank you for joining us today. Come back, join us again next Friday and every day on Accelerate. This is Andy.
And Bridget.
Talk to you next week.